So we want to do whatever we can to take care of trees. And sometimes that means hiring a professional. You've driven down the street, you've seen pruning along power lines, and you realize that people that are making the decisions are not professionals. Sorry, City Light. However, we can also pin the design of putting a tree 8 feet away from a 38,000 volt wire as not a professional design decision either. So in essence, the City Light is merely carrying out the execution sentence that should have been issued when the tree was planted initially. So we have a lot of these conflicts. But I want to tell you about why you should act to take care of your trees. Toby referred to several ongoing legal processes that are currently extant. We have a lot of hot tree action at City Hall right now. Several different measures are being undertaken by our city government to water down tree protection in the name of strengthening tree protection. Does that sound like doublespeak? Your city council submitted the city staff submitted to council 2 proposals to gut the tree ordinance, calling it a tree ordinance. So what you hear will be very similar to that new subdivision that just went in down the road, Oak Grove subdivision. Guess how many oak trees live in Oak Grove subdivision? 0. So the planning department, you heard earlier, is writing these tree ordinances and these actions. And you also heard that the planning department is refereeing contests made against these actions. That is the classic case of the fox guarding the hen house. You have contamination and conflict of interest down at City Hall. So when I say you should act, what I really mean is click the button and write the letter to your city council member. That's what I mean. You have to actually sign your name at the bottom of an email. And the city council is going to listen. You might think that they won't listen. They are listening. So here I've kind of spoken only in generalities right now. But I did want to include some of this stuff about the green thumb and the weeds and content. Toby mentioned a dearth of content in the documents. They're lacking substance. So let's just talk a little bit about substance here for a minute. Okay, you can have a green thumb in 5 steps. Now I've just jumped you from being unable to count to 2, but now you have to jump to 5. So here is my systematic inspection method for examining a tree. When I walk up to a tree, I see 5 things. I've broken down this biological creature into 5 structures, 5 wood structures. Okay, trees are made out of wood. Trees have living cells in that wood. Okay, so the very first one is the roots of the tree. And usually, when you're looking at a tree at the soil line, you can see that the tree widens out and flares out and gets larger as it enters the soil. And as the roots fan out into the soil around the tree, there are signs in the shape of the soil, the shape of the roots as they are partially exposed underneath the tree. Okay, we can see cavities in roots where the lawnmower has run over those roots. So I am using my eyes to take visual clues about the condition, the health, safety of the tree. Okay, so that's number 1. Now I'm gonna go through 2, 3, 4, and 5 really fast because we have started at ground level. We're doing a systematic inspection of the tree. And we are going to go up from the ground, look at the trunk. Answer me this question. Why are tree trunks not cylindrical. They're gnarly, they're knobby, they're buttressed. They have character, they have shape. They are not perfect cylinders. So the reason for this is because of wind stress on the upper portion of the tree causes the tree to bend, and right where the tree feels this shear force, it adds new wood. Trees grow faster in the portions of them that are stressed. So where the tree bends, you will have a knob. There can be long bands running up and down the tree where the tree is trying to split itself apart and resisting that temptation and adding new wood to beef itself up. Wood is like a muscle. When the tree moves, that's exercise, and the tree gets bigger right there, preventing future failure. In humans, we call this self-preservation. I don't think that the trees are really that sentient enough to call it self-preservation, because we have a lot of human behavior that exhibits itself as self-preservation and self-destruction, and trees are self-destructive. So as we move up the trunk of the tree, the third one is the branches, farther up is the twigs, and the last one is the leaves. So now that you have your green thumb, the results of your tree inspection have considered all of the factors in the roots, the trunk, the branches, the twigs, and the leaves. You can see where the problems are going to occur. And some of these branches dip down too low. They dip down too low to the point where they're like a bamboo fishing rod that's catching a orca instead of a trout. And those branches can fracture. The twigs. Twigs are thin. They're maybe the diameter of a pin. And when a bug comes along and munches on a twig, that twig can fracture, sap can ooze out, and more bugs can come in. The leaves that are out on the ends of those twigs have all kinds of sweet sugar running through sap that's only a few cells thick. Free lunch for every termite in the neighborhood. So when you're looking at a tree, you can see where the problems are likely to occur. Just open your eyes. But how does this affect us politically? I've told you the wonderful things about how trees allow us to appreciate the whooshing of the wind. I've told you about the threat to trees from bugs taking a bite out of their delicious sap. But what about infill development? There is no more city limits. We now can only build within city limits, alongside existing trees. And this is the primary threat to trees in Seattle. So I just hope that everybody that comes here today realizes that the sign out front that says Notice of Proposed Land Use Action is a shot across the bow. It's the lantern hanging in the Old North Church. It says, get off your rear and write that letter to the city council and let them know that you feel that development should occur alongside existing trees and not instead of existing trees. This is the canary in the coal mine. The tree is the only thing in our development code that is understood that can supersede the value of the building. We have these things called environmentally critical areas, which are steep slopes, which are riparian zones, which are areas where we could have landslides or other catastrophic issues, and builders may not do things in environmentally critical areas. Our city council needs to be told that we need an environmentally critical tree zone where it is illegal to cut down or remove significant amounts of leaves of trees. This environmentally critical tree zone needs to be part of the Seattle Municipal Code, Chapter 2511. And if you think that Chapter 2511 of the SMC, Seattle Municipal Code, is going to impress your city council member and your new mayor, then right down 2511. But the thing is that the tree must be considered the highest and best use of the land. When we have our codes, we have exceptions to our codes. So if the tree is been bunched on by termites, if the roots have been run over with the lawnmower so many times that the tree could actually fall over, then that tree must be allowed to be removed, even though it is a critical component of our environmental area. So what you will find is the ability to say that the tree is valuable being attacked from all sides. Guess who's the expert at attacking the value of a tree? The guy with the roll of blueprints under his arm. And when he walks into city council, pulls out that roll of blueprints and he slams it down on the counter at the planning department, unrolls it and says, I want to exceed the code and remove these trees so that I can build this building that is going to be sold in buku bucks for my company and for the county assessor, who our city council never seems to notice is the person that actually increases the assessed valuation of land after the trees are removed and buildings replace them. So please write those letters. Listen to Steve now. He's going to tell you how to do that. He's going to tell you all of his work. We've heard the work that Toby is doing, and this work, unfortunately, cannot proceed unless it includes you. So thank you very much. And since 27, when Cameron invited me to this meeting, that was what was bubbling up. Notice no notes. No notes for me. I'm a cold talker. Thank you.
All right. A lot has already been said, so and a lot more could be said. So try to keep it in perspective and note two things that handed out. One is a Friends of Seattle's Urban Forest that worked out a few years ago some priorities for updating a tree ordinance, and I also put together here a survey of Seattle Urban Forestry for the tree ordinance that I'd like you to fill out. It's basically a lot of leading questions, but the questions basically discuss a lot of the issues out there involved in why a tree ordinance is needed, and what are the issues before us in terms of doing an updated tree ordinance. Back in 2009, when the Seattle Urban Forestry Commission was created, the city also did what was called an interim tree ordinance until they could come up with a final version. Well, it's now 9 years later, and there is no updated version yet, and it's sort of up to us to continue to push that to make that happen. I'm optimistic in the sense I think that a number of changes have happened. We went through people like Mayor McGinn, who over 4 years would never meet with us to discuss a tree ordinance, even though he was a Sierra Club person, which is an irony, I guess, when you look at it in terms of what type of Sierra Club person was he when he didn't consider the green infrastructure in the city. You went through the same thing with Mayor Murray, who, yes, he was very strongly supportive of trees in word, but in terms of deed, he kept on, among other things, that Diane Sugamura, who I think was basically the main stumbling block and why we never got a stronger tree ordinance. My impression was that she was very intent on helping builders build, not in terms of protecting trees. And that gets down to one of the central issues that were involved in the tree issue, is certainly the conflict of interest that exists in terms of having a Department of Planning and Development, now called the Department of Construction and Inspections, and a separate planning department, whose mission is basically to help builders build within the city. They're not an environmental agency. And that goes down to a conflict that was very evident back in 2009 when the Seattle City Auditor came up with a report, and it's called Management of City Trees Can Be Improved. And one of the things he noted was that there were 8 city departments that dealt with trees, but they weren't really coordinating among each other. And he recommended that they be consolidated into having a single oversight, because right now, or what has happened over the years is each of the agencies and the departments in the city that deal with trees, they look out for their own interest. SDOT looks out for their interests in terms of transportation issues. The public utilities looks out for it in terms of their interests, in terms of, providing electricity to the city. That's a priority over, say, protecting the trees. These are issues that create conflicts where there isn't an overall voice that says, hey, I represent the trees in the city. I represent what's going on with our environmental issues. And I've urged it in the past and still urge that, why don't we have a Department of Environmental Quality? We have a city department, not a department, but the Office of Sustainability and Environment. That's not a department. They are actually under other city agencies in terms of their interaction. They're not a full-fledged city department. They don't have responsibility for, say, I'm here to protect the environment in the city and people's health and the health of our trees. So this is one of the conflicts that continues. It's one of the issues there in terms of the citizens groups have been urging over the years that we consolidate tree management in one department. And other cities basically do this, or they have maybe 2 departments in terms of dealing with it, and they work together. A lot of the stuff in terms of the reports and information, note that I've developed over the years under the Friends of Seattle's Urban Forest a website. It's friends.urbanforest.org. It's on this handout in terms of priorities. Well, you find a lot of I use it to post as much information as I can on what's going on. So for instance, you'll find links to the city auditor's report done 9 years ago. You'll find the tree regulation research project, which is Toby mentioned. The city started in 2017 and went through basically a year-long process and then produced a final report March 31st. Actually, it started in 2016, and this was all behind the scenes. I was on the Seattle Urban Forestry Commission all during that time, and never once was it mentioned that internally the city staff was looking at updating or looking at evaluating how effective was our tree ordinance within the city. And so this was a secret document. It was March 31st, 2007 was when they released it. People like the mayor and some of the city council got briefed on it, but Seattle Urban Forestry Commission, which is supposed to be there to help advise the mayor and city council on tree issues, never got this document. The reason was largely because of their conclusions. And those
This document was released the day after Papadopoulos was exposed. And if you remember, Trump said that Papadopoulos was he slammed Papadopoulos.
It was a coffee boy.
When the city council, when the staff revealed this document, they said that this document was drafted by a highly qualified temporary employee. And that is meant to marginalize this document the same way that Papadopoulos was marginalized. So the city council learned from Trump's campaign about how to spin facts when they're caught with their pants down.
I just want to comment. I don't necessarily agree with Michael on this in terms of where I think the city is coming from. I take a more positive attitude, and I think we need to work with that. But I think the producing of this document basically happened because we got a new person, head of DCI. And that person, when told that, hey, the things don't seem to be working, he said, well, go and write it up. That's my understanding of what happened. He says, go investigate it. So put together this effort to get the city departments, OSE and DCI were involved in drafting it. Why they were reluctant to release the results was because their findings, the first one is, it says in general, very short, succinct, current code is not supporting tree protection. That was their finding after a year-long study, including bringing in an outside consultant. And there are like 30 different people listed, you'll find in the document that were involved from the city in working on this report. The other conclusions they had, which fits into what Toby is saying for the mandatory housing affordability appeal, is that said, we are losing exceptional trees and groves in general, most in environmentally critical areas, with most tree loss in landslide-prone areas. When trees come out, it's hazardous. There's no replacement required. And then under development, it says development and hardscape increase result in tree loss. Conifers and large species are coming out with deciduous and dwarf species coming in. So they have some very critical comments. The thing is, it's coming from internally within the city, and these are the people that have been involved with through the Seattle Urban Forestry Commission, a number of them. Even though we weren't involved in drafting this, the thing is we have meetings with the interdepartmental team once a year, and my sense is that I feel there are concerned people within the city, and what we need to do is use that concern and use it to lobby the city council and the mayor to say, you know, just what's in this report. Look, you've looked at it, you agree with what we, the citizens, are saying. The current tree ordinance is not working, it needs to be updated. Now, there are several concerns I would say here in terms of updating a tree ordinance I want to note to people. As Michael mentioned, under previous administrations, there had been, back in 2011, I believe in 2013, DPD came up with 2 drafts of a tree ordinance in response to the council's resolution back in 2009 to update a tree ordinance. The first one was outright rejected because the first response from DPD at the time was, we don't need more regulations, we need to get rid of them, in fact, because all we need to do is have incentives and education. I'm saying this literally, and the Urban Forestry Commission, fortunately in their youth as they were getting started, could see that this was a sham and didn't work, and so they went back and drafted a second ordinance, and the Urban Forestry Commission at that point, I wasn't on it yet at that point, but they likewise came up with the same conclusion that it was totally inadequate. They were proposing, they weren't dealing with the issues the city council had asked them to deal with, including requiring tree permits and looking at replacement, etc. And then it kind of went into a deep box somewhere and nothing further evolved. And I think that we're now with this tree regulation report out there, that we're in a position, and with the mandatory housing affordability issue on the table, that we're in a position where we have some ability to influence what's going on and to take Rob Johnson up on his proposal that yes, he would like to do something, and the thing is, it's up to us to put the push on to make things happen. Though I say there's concern that realize there are a couple of good things actually in this interim ordinance. One is that it sets up 74 trees under Director's Rule 16/2008 that are classified as exceptional and should not be removed. And this is a whole variety of both native and non-native trees. It goes by tree species and diameter. I think this is one of the things that's potentially could be eliminated, because Lake Forest Park adopted this, and then this last year they went and redid their rules, and they obviously have changed the people in Lake Forest Park, because now they've removed this and they only talk about looking at protecting the very, very large trees, and they eliminate this. The other thing is that in the previous drafts that the DPD had come up with, they had talked about no longer protecting tree groves. So again, there are some good things in here, and we need to be aware of that, as well as trying to push for new things. Summing up, what are the couple of things that we most need? I would say one is, with the current ordinance not working, is you need to, the problem is that the failure in the system is that there's, it's a complaint-based system. That it's fine to have this directive here coming from the development department saying we should protect these trees, but the thing is, how many of you can identify 74 different tree species and then be able to go out and know, is this a species that should be protected now? For instance, a dogwood tree may be like 6 inches, it's exceptional. The thing is, most of us aren't going to know that, and without having people required to file permits to cut down trees, the thing is, you can see a neighbor cut down a tree and you're not going to know, well, was that something that was acceptable or not? You just assume that it was all right, and that includes even the large exceptional trees. Say a Douglas fir, for instance, is 30 inches and above is exceptional. The problem is that there are very few 30-inch Douglas firs in the city because forest has all been cut off and over in the city except for about 50 acres, like in Schmitz Park and over in the lake here at Seward Park. And maybe a few at Discovery Park, but most of those also that's been cut over. So the problem is that the large trees are what's being lost, they're not being replaced. So the second issue, besides the tree permit system being a way to, one, monitor what's going on and have someone within the city say, yes, that tree can be removed or shouldn't be removed, is going to deal with the issue of tree replacement. And what's noted in this report is, among other things, large trees are removed frequently as hazard trees. Say, oh, this is in danger of falling down. This report noted that the number of people after the fact, when large trees were cut down and a complaint was filed, that the numbers went like from 25% to 75% or more being said, oh, they are hazard trees, meaning you can literally find an arborist someone that will say, yes, I'll say that tree was a hazard tree, particularly if the arborist was involved in the one that was cutting the tree down. But after the fact, it's frequently hard to determine, well, was it a hazard tree or not? So it becomes an issue. We need some accountability. You're not going to get that unless you set up a system like what Portland has done, Lake Forest Park, Sammamish. There are a number of other cities around the country that have requirements that you get a permit before you take down a tree. Right now the city says trees over 6 inches are supposed to be on the plan when you do development, and that's sort of the figure that a number of the cities use, a 6-inch tree, which is about that much. It's going to be a tree that's been around for a while at least. It doesn't say you can't cut it down in the city now. These are other issues on that sheet. Right now, while you're not supposed to cut down an exceptional tree, you're allowed to cut down 3 significant trees that are not exceptional. Now, a significant tree is one defined by the city as 6 inches in size. So what it's saying is that you can cut down 3 trees. But an example is one of the arborists on in the past in the Urban Forestry Commission. He had someone that wanted to cut down 4 trees, and he said, no, you can't do that. He didn't get the job. And then a few weeks later, as he's driving by, he noticed all 4 trees were gone. So that gets to, one of the reasons to have permits is to if you're going to have a limit of how many you can cut down, you got to know what's going on, because if someone's not complaining, because how many of you would know, oh, that person over there took down 4 trees, that's a violation of the law. And most people aren't going to know even those details on that level of what's involved. And it goes to another thing that we need to do, which in an ordinance is the issue of licensing, registering arborists who do work in the city. Other cities do this. Portland does it. Seattle actually does it. SDOT, when they passed their updated tree ordinance here a couple of years ago, they put in that arborists have to register and be put on a list as certified that they're qualified to do work in the city. And among other things, they have to have read the tree ordinance. They have to have gone through a briefing. Portland does 2 workshops a year. If the company doesn't have someone go to that workshop every year, they're off the list in terms of an arborist that's qualified to do work in the city. What you get is that you can get anyone that has a chainsaw. They aren't all as ethical and environmentally supportive of trees. For some of them, it's just a job. It's work, and they make money off cutting down trees, and you have to accept that. The only way you're going to get some control over it is to say, let's set up a register of people who are knowledgeable, because among other things, that if they violate the ordinance, they can be dropped off that list, or you could put in an ordinance that they are fined. Fines or penalties are imposed on them if they violate it. If they maybe do a second violation, they're banned completely from ever doing business in the city again. But it's sort of like we require lots of other people to be registered with the city, to do work in the city, and you have to apply for permits. Like you want to, put fences up, if you want to build sidewalks, if you want to, do electrical work in your house. There's all kinds of things the city requires permits for.